The clatter of pots and pans echoed through the bustling kitchen of La Maison Blanche, the kind of place where food was not just cooked but crafted into art. The air was thick with the rich aroma of seared meats, simmering sauces, and fresh herbs. Waiters in crisp uniforms darted in and out, balancing trays of delicate dishes destined for the city's most discerning diners. In the middle of it all stood Marcus Carter, a young man with a quiet confidence and hands that moved with practiced precision. Today was his first day as a line cook at one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants, and though his face was calm, his heart pounded with excitement. This was the opportunity he had worked toward for years. From the moment he arrived, Marcus knew the kitchen was a world of high pressure and sharp tempers. But he was no stranger to hard work. Growing up, he had learned to cook in his grandmother's tiny kitchen, where every meal was made with patience and care. Those lessons had carried him through diners, food trucks, and finally, to this moment. Then, the kitchen doors swung open with a sharp creak, and in walked head chef Daniel Graves. Tall and broad-shouldered, Graves carried himself like a man who expected obedience. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room before settling on Marcus. The other cooks tensed, their movements becoming quicker, more deliberate, as if afraid to draw attention. Graves stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor. "You must be the new hire," he said, his voice dripping with something that wasn't quite welcome. Marcus nodded. "Yes, chef. Marcus Carter." Graves' lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You ever worked in a real kitchen before, boy?" The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus clenched his jaw, but kept his voice steady. "Yes, chef. 5 years in New York, 2 at Bistro Lafayette." Graves let out a humorless chuckle. "Fancy names don't mean anything here. This isn't some backyard barbecue. You keep up or you're gone." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing there, the weight of the challenge settling over him. The first shift was brutal. Orders flew in faster than Marcus could process them. Sweat trickled down his back as he juggled multiple dishes, his hands moving in a blur. Every few minutes, Graves would appear behind him, watching, waiting for a mistake. And when Marcus finally did slip just a second too slow on plating a dish, Graves was there. "What is this?" Graves snarled, snatching the plate from Marcus's hands. "You call this presentation? A child could do better." Marcus swallowed hard. "I'll fix it, chef." "You'll do more than fix it," Graves snapped. "You'll do it again. And again. Until it's perfect." The other cooks kept their heads down, their silence louder than any words. Marcus could feel their pity, their fear. But he refused to let it break him. As the night wore on, the taunts continued. Graves criticized his knife skills, mocked the way he seasoned food, even made snide remarks about his focus. But Marcus said nothing. He just worked harder, faster, determined to prove himself. By the time the last order was out and the kitchen began to quiet, Marcus's muscles ached, and his mind was exhausted. But he had survived the first day. As he gathered his things to leave, one of the older cooks, a man named Luis, pulled him aside. "Don't let him get to you," Luis muttered. "He's like this with everyone at first." Marcus nodded, but something in Luis's eyes told him this was different. Graves didn't just test new cooks. He broke them. Walking out into the cool night air, Marcus took a deep breath. He had gotten the job he dreamed of. But now, he had to ask himself, was it worth the cost? The answer, for now, was yes. Because Marcus Carter wasn't a man who backed down from a challenge. And this kitchen? This cruel, beautiful, punishing kitchen? It had just met its match. The morning sun had barely risen when Marcus arrived at La Maison Blanche for his second week. His body still ached from the brutal first shifts, but his determination burned brighter than ever. He entered through the staff entrance, the scent of yesterday's meals lingering in the air, mixed with a sharp tang of industrial cleaner. The kitchen stood empty and silent, waiting to come alive with the day's chaos. Marcus set to work immediately. He knew Chef Graves valued punctuality, but more than that, he knew showing initiative might earn him even a sliver of respect. He began prepping vegetables, his knife moving in smooth, practiced strokes. The rhythmic sound of the blade against the cutting board was almost meditative. By the time the other cooks trickled in, Marcus had already prepped 3 stations worth of Maison Blanche. Luis gave him an approving nod as he tied on his apron. "You're here early," he remarked. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel. "Figured I'd get ahead while it's quiet." Luis opened his mouth to respond when the kitchen doors swung open with a bang. Chef Graves stood there, his sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on Marcus. A slow smirk curled his lips. Well, well. Someone's eager to impress. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Just doing my job, chef." Graves strode forward, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. He picked up a perfectly julienned carrot between his fingers, examined it, then let it drop back onto the cutting board. "Decent knife work," he admitted before adding, "for a beginner." The backhanded compliment stung, but Marcus simply nodded. "Thank you, chef." As the day's service began, Marcus threw himself into the work. He moved between stations with precision, his focus unshakable even as the kitchen grew hotter and louder around him. But no matter how well he performed, Graves found ways to undermine him. When Marcus plated a duck confit that drew murmurs of approval from the other cooks, Graves appeared at his shoulder. "Too much sauce," he declared, dragging his finger through the carefully arranged drizzle. "Amateur mistake." When Marcus perfectly timed 3 steak orders to come up simultaneously, Graves scoffed. "Lucky guess." The worst came during the dinner rush. Marcus was in the middle of searing scallops when Graves suddenly barked, "Carter, my office. Now." The kitchen froze. Marcus carefully removed the pan from the heat and followed Graves into the cramped office. The door clicked shut behind them. Graves leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "You think you're special, don't you?" Marcus blinked. "No, chef." "Don't lie to me," Graves snapped. "Coming in early, showing off your knife skills, trying to make my other cooks look bad." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "I'm just trying to do good work." Graves pushed off the desk, looming over Marcus. "Here's how this works. You keep your head down, you do what you're told, and maybe you'll last the month. But if you keep trying to show me up," he smiled, cold and humorless, "you'll be back flipping burgers before you can say food stamp." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus felt his face grow hot, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. "Understood, chef." Graves studied him for a long moment before jerking his head toward the door. "Get back to work." Marcus returned to the kitchen to find his scallops ruined, burned to blackened crisps in his absence. The other cooks avoided his eyes as he scraped them into the trash. That night, as Marcus walked to the bus stop, the cold wind biting at his face, he replayed the day's events in his mind. The unfair criticisms, the deliberate sabotage, the thinly veiled threats. He thought about quitting, about walking away, and never looking back. But then he remembered his grandmother's words, spoken years ago as she taught him to make her famous gumbo. "Nothing worth having comes easy, baby. You gotta season the struggle with patience." Marcus squared his shoulders as the bus pulled up. He would endure. He would prove himself. And one day, soon Chef Daniel Graves would regret ever underestimating him. The kitchen of La Maison Blanche hummed with its usual pre-service tension, but tonight something different crackled in the air. Marcus could feel it in the way the other cooks moved around him, their eyes darting toward him then quickly away. 3 weeks had passed since his hiring, 3 weeks of enduring Chef Graves' relentless torment, but tonight would be different. Marcus methodically arranged his station, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon preparing for operation. He had spent his rare day off practicing knife cuts until his fingers cramped, perfecting sauces until his tiny apartment smelled like a gourmet restaurant. He would not give Graves any reason to criticize him tonight. The dinner rush hit like a hurricane. Orders flooded in, tickets piling up in a fluttering white cascade. Marcus moved through the chaos with quiet efficiency, his body operating on pure muscle memory. Seared scallops with brown butter. Perfect. Duck breast with cherry reduction. Flawless. Beef Wellington. A masterpiece. Across the kitchen, Chef Graves watched with narrowed eyes as Marcus' dishes left the pass without a single callback. The head chef's jaw tightened visibly when a regular customer specifically complimented Marcus' herb-crusted lamb chops. Then it happened. "Carter." Graves' voice cut through the kitchen like a cleaver. "Where's that halibut? Table 12's been waiting 15 minutes. Marcus didn't look up from the pan. He was carefully monitoring. "Coming right up, chef. Just finishing the beurre blanc." Graves stormed over, his face flushing an ugly red. "I don't pay you to make excuses. That fish should have been plated 5 minutes ago." Marcus carefully lifted the halibut from the pan, the skin crisped to golden perfection. "It needed 30 more seconds, chef. Any less, and the center would be." The world seemed to slow as Graves reached out and deliberately knocked the pan from Marcus' hand. The beautiful piece of fish hit the floor with a wet slap, sauce splattering across Marcus' immaculate whites. The entire kitchen froze. The sizzle of pans, the clatter of utensils, even the shouted orders all died in an instant. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto the scene unfolding at Marcus' station. Graves' voice dripped with venom. "Now it's ruined. Just like your chances of working in a real kitchen." He turned to address the silent staff. "Everyone gather round. Let this be a lesson about respecting the chain of command." Marcus felt something inside him snap. The months of belittlement, the racist microaggressions, the sabotaged dishes all rose up in his throat like bile. He slowly untied his apron, his movements deliberate. "You're right, chef," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the silent kitchen. "I am leaving, but not because I can't cook." He folded the apron neatly and set it on the counter. "Because I won't work for someone who mistakes cruelty for leadership." Graves' face twisted in fury. "Get out before I throw you out." Marcus turned to his stunned coworkers. Some looked shocked. A few nodded almost imperceptibly. Luis gave him the smallest smile. As Marcus walked toward the exit, he paused at the door and turned back. "By the way, chef, that halibut was for your brother's table. Enjoy explaining why his anniversary dinner is delayed." The door swung shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the kitchen. Outside, the cool night air felt like freedom. Marcus took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. A text flashed on screen. "Heard what happened. Come by the spice route tomorrow. We could use a cook with principles. Maria." Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. His journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The morning sun painted the streets of Chicago in golden hues as Marcus stood outside the spice route, his breath visible in the crisp autumn air. The restaurant looked nothing like La Maison Blanche's sterile elegance. Vibrant murals adorned the brick exterior, and the scent of cumin, coriander, and smoked paprika drifted through the propped-open kitchen door. Marcus hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside. The kitchen buzzed with activity, but the energy felt different here. Cooks moved with purpose, but without fear, calling out to each other in a mix of Spanish and English. The clatter of pans and sizzle of oil formed a rhythmic backdrop to their work. At the center of it all stood Chef Maria Torres, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid as she expertly flipped something in a cast-iron skillet. She looked up as Marcus entered, her sharp eyes assessing him in one quick glance. The famous Marcus Carter," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Famous." Maria laughed, a rich, warm sound. Word travels fast in restaurant kitchens, especially when someone stands up to Daniel Graves. She gestured to the line.
"Come.
Let's see if you're as good as they say." The next few hours passed in a blur of chopping, stirring, and tasting. Marcus found himself smiling as he worked, something he hadn't done in months. Maria moved through the kitchen like a conductor, correcting gently, "More lime in that marinade," praising freely, "Beautiful knife work on those peppers," and occasionally sharing stories about her grandmother's recipes from Oaxaca. During a lull in service, Maria handed Marcus a steaming cup of café de olla. "So," she said, leaning against the counter, "tell me why I should hire you." Marcus stared into the dark liquid, watching the cinnamon swirl. "Because I cook with heart," he said finally. Because I believe food should tell a story. And because. He met Maria's gaze. I'm tired of working in kitchens where people are treated like ingredients to be used and discarded. Maria studied him for a long moment before nodding. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Don't be late. As Marcus left the restaurant that evening, his phone buzzed with messages from former coworkers at La Maison Blanche. 2 more cooks quit today, read one. Graves is losing it, said another. Marcus tucked his phone away without responding. That night, in his tiny apartment, Marcus carefully unpacked his grandmother's old recipe book, the pages stained with decades of love and cooking. He ran his fingers over her handwritten notes, hearing her voice in his mind. Food is memory, baby. Make yours worth remembering. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The Spice Route's kitchen hummed with a vibrant energy that Marcus had never experienced at La Maison Blanche. 3 months had passed since he joined Maria's team, and in that short time, something remarkable had happened. The once struggling restaurant was gaining attention, with food critics praising its bold flavors and unapologetic authenticity. Tonight, the dining room was packed, every table filled with eager patrons, while Marcus stood confidently at the helm of the line, orchestrating dishes with a newfound authority. Across town, La Maison Blanche was falling apart. Marcus heard the rumors through the kitchen grapevine. After his very public departure, 2 more senior cooks had walked out. Then the pastry chef quit without notice. The remaining staff, overworked and demoralized, made mistakes that even Graves' intimidating presence couldn't prevent. Online reviews mentioned declining quality and unpleasant atmosphere. The final blow came when the restaurant's most loyal customer, a powerful food critic, published a scathing review titled, "The Rot at the Core of Fine Dining." One evening, as Marcus was perfecting a new mole recipe, his phone buzzed with a message from Luis. "You won't believe this," it read. "Graves just got fired." Owner walked him out in front of the whole staff. Maria glanced over from her station, noticing the look on Marcus' face. "Good news?" she asked. Marcus set down his phone. "Justice," he replied simply. The following week, Marcus found himself face to face with his past. He was selecting produce at the farmer's market when he spotted Daniel Graves standing near the apple crates. The once imposing chef looked diminished, his shoulders hunched, his expensive chef's jacket replaced with a wrinkled polo shirt. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Marcus saw something unexpected in Graves' expression. Not anger. Not even resentment.
Shame.
Graves opened his mouth as if to speak, then turned abruptly and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus watched him go, feeling neither triumph nor pity, just a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the universe balanced its scales in the most poetic ways. That night at the Spice Route, Maria gathered the staff for an announcement. "We've been nominated for Best New Restaurant," she said, holding up a letter. "And Marcus." She smiled. "The review committee specifically mentioned your braised short ribs." As the team cheered, Marcus looked around the kitchen at the smiling faces of people who had become his family. He thought of his grandmother's recipes now featured on the menu, of the regular customers who asked for him by name, of the young culinary students Maria let him mentor. This was success. Not Michelin stars or pretentious accolades, but the respect of people who mattered. The freedom to create. The joy of cooking without fear. Somewhere out there, Daniel Graves was learning a hard lesson about what truly made a great chef. Meanwhile, Marcus was living it. The aroma of sizzling garlic and toasted spices filled the Spice Route's kitchen as Marcus adjusted the flame under a bubbling pot of jollof rice, his grandmother's recipe now the restaurant's most requested dish. 8 months had transformed both the restaurant and the man. Where once Marcus moved with tense precision, now his motions flowed with confident ease. Where once he cooked to prove himself, now he cooked to share his soul. A commotion at the kitchen entrance broke his concentration. Maria stood there, her usually composed face alight with excitement. "Marcus," she called over the din, waving a cream-colored envelope. "This just came for you." The envelope bore the elegant logo of the James Beard Foundation. Marcus' fingers trembled slightly as he broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The words blurred momentarily before coming into focus. "You are cordially invited to accept the Rising Star Chef of the Year award." The kitchen erupted. Maria hugged him tightly while the other cooks clapped him on the back. Even the dishwashers cheered. This wasn't just his victory, it belonged to all of them. The night of the awards ceremony arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Marcus stood before his apartment mirror adjusting his suit jacket, remembering the last time he'd worn it for his La Maison Blanche interview. How different he looked now. The shadows under his eyes from constant stress had faded. The tension lines between his brows had smoothed. He smiled at his reflection, slipping his grandmother's lucky wooden spoon into his pocket before heading out. The awards gala glittered with culinary royalty. As Marcus navigated the crowded ballroom, a familiar figure caught his eye near the champagne table. Daniel Graves stood alone, nursing a drink, his once imposing frame seeming smaller somehow. Their gazes locked across the room. Marcus could have walked away, could have enjoyed the sweet satisfaction of ignoring his former tormentor. But that wasn't who he was anymore. "Chef Graves," Marcus said as he approached. "Congratulations on your nomination." It was true, Graves' new bistro had received a nod in the casual dining category, a far cry from his previous Michelin aspirations. Graves' eyes widened slightly before his professional mask slid back into place. "Carter." He took in Marcus' nomination badge. "Rising star, huh?" Silence stretched between them, filled with all the unspoken words of their history. Finally, Graves cleared his throat. "I heard about your restaurant success." Another pause. "You've done well for yourself." It wasn't an apology, but for Daniel Graves it was close. Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Simple. Gracious. No gloating, no bitterness. When Marcus' name was called an hour later, the applause thundered through the grand ballroom. As he took the stage, the spotlight warm on his face, he didn't speak about revenge or struggle. Instead, he told the story of his grandmother's kitchen, of Maria's mentorship, of the team at the Spice Route who believed in him. "Great cooking isn't about perfection," he said, his voice steady. "It's about passion. It's about respect for the food, for the craft, and most importantly, for the people beside you in the kitchen." Later, as Marcus celebrated with his team at an after-party, his phone buzzed with a notification. A new review had just gone live. Chicago Tribune's updated restaurant rankings. The Spice Route now held the top spot, while La Maison Blanche had fallen out of the top 10 entirely. Maria handed him a glass of champagne, her dark eyes shining with pride. "To the future," she toasted. Marcus clinked his glass against hers, looking around at the laughing faces of his colleagues, his friends. For the first time in his career, he felt no need to keep fighting, to keep proving himself. The battle was over. The cooking, the real, joyful, soulful cooking, was just beginning. The end.